Everybody, it is Marie here from Skeins. The Quarantine Diaries, day 9 on Friday, the 3rd of April. And I hope everyone is having a fantastic day today. It's a little bit cooler here in the Bay today, which is quite nice. And I've been really hoping that I'll be able to get out and get some knitting done over the last few days. And my stitching time has been sort of deeply interrupted because it's just, for one thing or another, it's been quite busy and full on. But you know what? That's a good thing. It means that the weeks go quickly and the days go fast. I know that a lot of knitting's been going on at your place. The Speak Easy is full of fantastic projects that you're sharing. I have a confession to make, and I saw it actually when I was looking early this morning. I completely forgot to change out. I haven't done. In fact, I'm going to write that on my list now. I completely forgot to put up the tile for the new binge knitting theme. So it is binge knitting, or just binge this week. So what you're binging on, whether it be a blanket, whether it be squares, are you binging on chockies and bickies and watching good telly, whatever it is that is getting you through the day at the moment, I want you to share it on the Speakeasy and show us what you're up to. So thank you for everybody that's doing that, because it really is quite wonderful. And it's from actually one of those posts that inspired me of what to talk about today. And it was someone was asking, it was probably earlier in the week, about what were some of their favourite knitting books that they had lying around, that, you know, you just go back to again and again and again. And I have to admit, you know, I have a huge library, and if you caught the chat yesterday with Charles has a massive library of knitting books, and he was talking about referring back to those books. And often, if he has a day where he's wanting to do something, he'll pull together a book. Like he referred to bobbles. One day he got all his books out that had different bobbles in it, and he sat down and he spent an entire day knitting every bobble and style of bobble he could find, and from that it gave him the techniques for when he goes to design. And to give you context of the stuff that he does, like we talked about the Kiwi hat, but I'm just going to hold up, this is his book called The Embellished Sock, and as you can see with the sock on the cover, it's a sock on the cover covered in bobbles, and he also has projects. He's bookmark is fallen out, like this one here. You see that one there? Now, do you know what's really special about that one? So I have that one. He just does all these really crazy, fun, exciting patterns for socks. I mean, look at that. Isn't that really sweet? So that was one of the things that he does. He refers back to those books all the time. And it got me thinking about the books, like some of the stuff that I look at now. So often what we will do is we will go automatically online. You know, it's almost like having, I don't know if you're a cook at home, and I am so guilty of this. I have 1,000,001 cookbooks. So many cookbooks, and often when I need to find a recipe, I'll just Google it and then go and pull one up online, even though if I'd spent 5 minutes I would have that one recipe for what I'm looking for and probably half a dozen books sitting on the shelf. And we're the same with knitting. You know, Ravelry is there, and it's easy, and it's you know, and that's something that is, you know, that you're wanting to, you know, it's easy to do. It will then, you think, oh, you know, we'll just look it up on Rav. But actually, sometimes you've actually already got what it is that you're looking for in a book. And during the time like this in the lockdown, take the time to sit down and have a look at what you've got in the library and see where those favourites are. And so for me, what I wanted to talk about is back when I was knitting a lot, when I first came to Hawke's Bay, the favourite things that I was knitting were a lot of baby items. And that was because that was at the time that I was having my family. My children now are, sorry, I've got an eyelash in my eye. And you can hear my dog. I've left the big dog outside. He's crying because I won't let him into the office, because he comes in if anyone's ever seen my big dog, I've got 2 dogs, a bulldog, which is my mummy's baby, a big dog who's daddy's baby, but he's a big sook, is a 116 kilo mastiff, but he thinks he's the size of a chihuahua. So he will come in here and he thinks that he can get underneath the table and lie at my feet. And of course, I think it was the first or second day of the quarantine diaries, he was knocking mannequins over and banging he was a menace, an absolute menace. So I've locked him outside. Anyhow, where was I going with this? Oh, baby books. So my kids are 12 and 13. And so I was sort of knitting some baby items, and it was funny, I've always knit, but I'd gone through sort of series of hiatuses. So I would knit for a number of years, and then I would go through a different phase of my life and I wouldn't do so much knitting, and then I would come back, and for me, it was a case I'd have a lot of friends, particularly through the ends of my 20s, that were all having children. So I'd start and knit stuff for them, and then I'd have a break and so on and so forth. So by the time my mid-30s rolled around and it became my time to have children, this was my go-to book. How many of you have got that in your cupboards? I'm sure you have, because this, at the time when this came out, I actually bought it not long after it came out. It's Claire Keaton, number 948. I don't think it's in print anymore. And as you can see by the cover, and actually if I do this, it will start falling out because the staples have sort of, look what I've just found inside there. Oh, look at that, Deb. Anyway, we could talk about that. We'll move that over there. I didn't even know that was there. I mean, look at the state of some of these pages. Yeah, it's very well loved, this book. And I loved it because it was so often, your skills have lapsed, or you haven't done stuff for a while. So there were a lot of just very simple and stylish patterns in here that worked very, very well for where my skill level was at the time. And this guy here was my absolute favorite. And it was a little asymmetrical, just hold that up, see if you can see it. There we go. A little asymmetrical jumper. And it's funny how things come together, how all of this sort of came together, because I was also talking to my cousin this morning in Wellington, and when I saw her last, she brought back a bag of all the baby knits that she had. She'd had a baby in her late 40s unexpectedly. And so I had baby knits that I had kept, had packed up and had sent down to her. And they had finally, after a number of years, and she's also passed these around amongst a number of her friends as well, they had bounced back to me. And it was really, really nice. It just shows you the longevity of how some of these items can last. I knit so much. I mean, as a knitter, having a baby is just the best thing. And I had a late autumn and a winter baby, so for both our kids, and it was, so for me, that's nirvana. I'm able to knit for these little guys right from the get-go, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later on. But it's been so wonderful that I trust me, I did a lot of knitting, to be able to hand a lot of that knitting around and pass it around, stuff that I made for my boys. So much of it has then been passed around. Some has boomeranged back, but some has then gone on or been donated. And that's the longevity and the wonderful thing about wool, is that if it's looked after, and almost everything that I knit back then was not machine washable. I wasn't a machine washable girl, and it has lasted incredibly well. So this little pattern here that I showed you, this was one of the little, and this is newborn size, because this is what I made for my little guy. And I did it with, I think that one there had buttons, did it with buttons. I actually found, for me, I found snaps worked better. Isn't that the cutest thing? And this was back, of course, when variegated yarns were everywhere. Do you remember those? Look at that newborn size, a little bit of trimming on there. And I would even make like little boots to match. This one did actually have a hat. I used to do them in a set, hat, boots, and jumper. DK. Now this yarn is this yarn from memory, I think, was Keaton or Shepherd Colour for Me. I think it's still available. The Colour for Me is still available. And I mean, this one needs a bit of a depill, and it's actually quite good because I'll leave this one out, and when I'll cover off depilling in another Diaries later in the month. But it's just so good to see how things, how well things have survived. Here's another set. This is another one of the jumpers, I think, from this series. I think she says as she looks through. Oh no, potentially not. It must have been something from another series, another book that I'd done. But this is what the yarn that now became vintage. And as you can see, I love this so much, is because, the things that you learn. I had stuffed the sleeves up, and look. And I love that, because to me, this is a journey. This is a journey it's almost like a roadmap of my knitting journey. And again, little hat to match wee boots. I'm going to talk about this hat in a second. I was so excited when I got the books and this hat was in here. This hat was part of a set, those boots, and actually came. The other thing that this hat was part of was that little jacket there was done in this, and this is alpaca DK. So I did this hat, boots, and that little jacket. And that is what our oldest son left the maternity unit in. And it was really special. And I cannot tell you how special being able to bring him home for us that was. For those that know me very well, they are aware of the struggle that we had having children. And I'm actually going to touch on this now because, it's been a really crazy week. And one of the things this week that has been debated hotly in forums, both closed and open around the internet and social media, has been our relevance and our integrity in terms of opening our business for essential need during this crisis. And one of the elements that we talked about was in terms of those seniors at home, particularly the 70 pluses in the lockdown. And it was one of the messages that I actually received this week that really made me think about it. And it was somebody who was a mum at home who had a newborn, and they were really, and they're struggling, and they're trying to sort of, any of you that will remember, if you've been at home with a newborn, it is tough. For the case of us, we had a struggle with fertility. If you're someone who has had issues with fertility, I don't need to tell you the stress that it places not only on your mind, your body, your relationship. It is tough. It's really tough. In our case, it wasn't a case of not being able to get pregnant. I have a very, very rare genetic abnormality. So in our case, it was a case of staying pregnant. So by the time our oldest son was carried to term, or almost, he was a weenie bit early, I'd already lost 5 children. So this little guy, who we'd nicknamed Lucky all the way through the pregnancy, was unbelievably precious to us, as any newborn is to a family. And one of the few ways that I coped during this time, because the hormones are up and down, and the sense of loss that you have every time you lose a child during pregnancy, the depression that goes along with it, the one solace, the one constant that I had in my life that gave me relief was knitting. So I kept knitting for this baby that I was so determined that one day that I might have. So if anyone ever belittles, can you hear my dog? What are you doing there, buddy? Do you want me to move that? Here you go. I had the gall of placing that on the mat. anyone who ever belittles the power that something like that can have to actually make your life easier has obviously have been privileged enough to have never gone through that experience. So that's all as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I've got to say about that. Right, I'm going to talk about these hats because as you can see, I have a few of them, all pretty much the same pattern. This was a bit of a go-to for me back in the day. So for those who are at home and you're looking for something to knit and you're wanting to, and you're not really sure what you're wanting to do, or you're wanting to knit something for babies, I'm not even going to write this down and tell you because this is honestly the easiest hat in the world to do. Now, I can't remember how many stitches you need to cast on. I think it's, have a look at a DK baby hat. Oh, actually, Marie, have a look in here for a DK baby hat pattern. These bound. Oh, there we go. There it is. There it is. Okay. Now she's not got glasses on, so she won't be able to see it. Dum da dum, dum 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 da 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 dum. And where does it say hat, people? Shape armholes, da da dee da, da da dee da, da da dee da. Hat, boom. Right, newborn hats started around 66, 68 odd stitches through to kind of toddler sizes up to about 90 odd. Okay, so somewhere in there, it's between 60 and 90 stitches. Right. DK, you cast that on. So this guy here probably would have been, because this is newborn, this would have been in the vicinity of probably about 66 stitches. You cast your stitches on, and I've done a little moss stitch, as you can see, little moss stitch border. Doesn't need to be moss stitch. It could be garter stitch, like that one there. That one is moss stitch. That one actually is, I kept it stocking stitch so it would roll back up on itself. But that's your brim. You could even, if you're really super clever, if you're one of these super clever people, you could even do like an I-cord. You do an I-cord and then pick the stitches up across the ear if you wanted to. Just saying. Right, you've got your stitches. Then you're going to knit yourself a rectangle. You just keep knitting and stocking stitch all the way up until you get to about that, which I think, looking at that, is around, I think it's about 15 centimetres. Yeah, thereabouts. And then you've now got this nice rectangle. And then all you do is you find the middles. Here's the one on this one. There it is. So the middle is at the apex of one corner, and you just essentially pull them together into 4 like that. Now, it doesn't have to be in 4. I noticed on this one I did it at 3. That's all I've done. And then I've mattress stitched the top, and I've mattress stitched the side. See, that's the stripes, that one. That's not too bad, actually. I got better at it. That one's pretty good. One of these is really good. You know, that one's not so good. That is honestly the world's easiest baby hat, and I did heaps of these. So you get these really funny little cute points at the top, which are loads of fun, and it is something so quick and easy to knit. And then if you've got ones like this, if you have got literally a little script, I mean, I know you have them. You'll have that little jar, or I used to have a baize, which is full of all my yarn scraps. So end of a project, you know, you've got that little bit of a ball left, and I biff it in there. This is the perfect project to do with all of those scrappy little pieces. So if you're not a scrap blanket sort of person, that doesn't really float your boat, but you're wanting to do something, this is the perfect project to do. 4mm needle, by the way, or 3.75, or even, you know, don't get too fussy on it. Don't overthink it, guys. Honestly, don't overthink it. And, you know, throw some stripes in there if you haven't got very much. But these are the perfect sort of hats that when we come out of this lockdown, for those charities, these are the ideal hats that you'll be able to get to your charity of choice at the time. And no pattern is really required. You can just get them all done at home. They're really simple knitting for while you're in front of the telly. And as you can see, I did one or two of those while I was knitting for my kids. The other, and see, I just love, this is actually another one from this book here. They had a set of dungarees. And I had, as you can see, all this sort of 70s inspired sort of yarns. And I didn't have enough for the entire project, but I literally had, I think it must have had one ball of each colour, or even just a part ball of each colour. And that's what that turned into. Now, the thing that was really amazing is that I knitted this for our oldest son, who ended up being a redhead, surprise, surprise. And and if you've seen photos of my big boy, he is, we refer to him as the ginger. So there we go. That's that one there. It's one of my absolute faves. I guess, thank you, Kerry. I was squealed with joy when I got this one back. This is going to be one of those when I'm much older, and hope that my children one day will bless me with grandchildren. Not holding out hope. I have boys after all, but this will be one of those projects that I will very much want to pass on. I adore it. The other thing and everything I've shown you there is DK, by the way, and a lot of these are for newborns. So if you're at home thinking, I can't knit anything for a newborn or a baby because I don't have any 4-ply, posh tosh. You don't need 4-ply. I honestly put my babies in double knit right from the day dot. Renly, are you quite done down there? Are you quite done? Thank you. Are you going to lie down? You're making a lot of noise. Do you want to say hello to everybody? You ready? You going to say hello? So you're going to be quiet now, aren't you? Do you know what they say? Never work with animals and children. Right. So you don't need DK. I did nearly everything in DK. Now I've stopped talking to him. He's going to start making noise again. However, I did do 4-ply knitting. And this is actually, I made this one for our second son because he was born in early April. In fact, his birthday's in less than a week. And so this is 4-ply. And if anyone recognises this, yes, it is 4-ply sock yarn. It was one of the Calf Bassett collections of colours by Regia. So I was very fond of sock yarns for this. There's another one in sock yarn. Here's another one in sock yarn. So I was rather fond of those. I'm going to pull this one back up because this was the precursor to what is now Legacy. This is actually, in fact, this was the very, 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 very first run of Heritage Organic Merino. Because I wrote a series of patterns. In fact, it's one of the first pieces of work I did for Design Spun, was write a series of patterns for this yarn. And as you can see, you can hardly see it because it's so pale, but that patterning of stitch, as you can see, that little mosaic stitch pattern has been a favourite of mine for a very, very long time. So yeah, so there you go. That's part of my kids knitting collection. So thank you very much to Kerry for getting those back and having them there. And hopefully if you're at home and you do have stash and you're thinking smaller projects for babes is something that you'd like to do, that, you know, even just doing that basic hat is enough, or it inspires you to dig in the back of that cupboard to find, because I'm sure all of us have one of these Clecketons, or we've probably got a patents book hiding there somewhere, or there's bound to be something. So, you know, make use of those books that you've got there at that time and take them out, because it's actually quite fun to go back through and revisit some of those patterns. So I think that that's something that you should definitely have a look at. Right, good morning to everybody. I know I did see a couple of questions pop up in here, and I'm going to have a quick look at those. So, right, how long is it going to take for my order to arrive? So that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. As you know, we are all working remotely. I'm here in my shed in Ahuriri. Claire is literally at her place out at Bayview, and Damien is all by himself, cue music now, at the warehouse packing orders. Now, because Damien, that was part of the condition is that we had to do it with someone working solo, because then that way we could guarantee the safety of the supply chain. So Damien is there by himself, and normally at this time of year, pick, pack and dispatching would be done. We usually would have at least 1.5 to 2 people doing that role, but we can't. So we just have Damien. So Damien is there by himself, and he's also got increased not purification, increased hygiene measures to make sure that everything he is doing is getting out to you safely. So he obviously, we actually have a full, in the warehouse we've got a full bathroom and everything there, so he sanitizes thoroughly when he goes in. He's got hand sanitizer that he then uses in between, very frequently between orders. All the yarns that we do have in stock were actually all received in stock well before the lockdown period. And of course, now the lockdown has been in place for 9 days. Anything that may have come in very late, you don't need to worry about surfaces there. But because Damien is taking all those extra steps and that extra care, he can only process a certain number of orders per day, and we're not wanting him there too long each day, just because he's obviously there on his own, and security and the like. So he's methodically working through them. Usually, if you're in an urban situation, your order will be going out the next day. We are saying to people to allow up to 5 working days before your order gets dispatched, just because we're taking extra special care. So I can't answer yours specifically, Sue, but I do know that he's worked through, so what's today, Friday? I think he's definitely worked through the first Tuesday and Wednesday. He's now working on the back end of Wednesday and Thursday orders. So he's we're running for our usual timing. We're sort of running a day or 2 off, but that may stretch out depending on the number of orders, and also too depending on where things are at with our delivery supplier. Our delivery supplier are New Zealand Couriers, as I've mentioned before. We couldn't have done this without them. And I know today that there's 2 things happening today, actually, online. One live now is the Gumboot Day appeal here on Facebook. So once you finish with me, why don't you pop over and see what Mike King is up to? And if you're able to support Gumboot Day, which goes towards mental health for our children and for our youth, this is something I think is incredibly important. So if you're able to do that, that would be great. And then the other thing they're looking at doing today, another initiative by MediaWorks, is I think is at 5 o'clock or 10 to 5. I might need to look that up this afternoon. Raise a glass to all our essential workers, and there are so many out there, and definitely these drivers are in that group. They are doing an incredible job. It's tough for them. They've got essential goods that they're moving through, but they also have seen a massive reduction in parcels. So these guys and these men and women are out there delivering, and they are wanting to work, they're wanting to be there, and they they're like everyone else at the minute. They're worried about their jobs, their livelihoods and their futures. So thank you for them for being so supportive during this time. So if you're out and about on your deck or your balcony, or even sitting in your armchair tonight, raise a glass to those guys at 5 o'clock. So that's pretty much me. I think, I'll better check. I was just checking question. I'm not very organised today. Coffee and say hello. Oh, it was so good to catch up with everybody. Oh, here we go. Barbara. I love Barbara. Is fabulous. Barbara saying, check out Mariana Mel on Revelry. Her knits are great too. Haha. She does a top-down sleeveless with stretch and grows, and lots of cardigans and hats. Barbara, that's gold. Thank you so much for that, because it's where to actually find these patterns is often a real struggle for people. So thank you very, very much for that. I have done very little cooking. We went old school in our house last night for tea, steak, egg and chips. So I haven't actually I did actually make a really neat pasta salad, but I didn't photograph it, and I haven't got organised to write down what I did. So I'm going to attempt to try and get some baking cooking, or even actually Barbara sent me a really, really good feijoa chutney recipe, which I'm itching to do because I have a surplus. I'm starting to get a little surplus of feijoas going. But no, and tomorrow I will find something. Well, tomorrow's Saturday. Tomorrow's Ethan Day. So tomorrow, yeah, Saturday. Woohoo! Right, tomorrow we're going to catch up with Ethan Barclay, and he is from Outlaw Yarn. So pajama party, I called that earlier this week. So I want everyone in their PJs tomorrow. I want a cup of your favourite beverage, maybe a scone or a cheeky chocky bucky, and come and join Ethan and I tomorrow. And we're going to be talking all things Stephen West. So join us then. Oh yeah, exciting! Yay! I love it when, those little surprises that make you happy. But until then, have a really fantastic day. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. And until then, stay safe, stitch on.